It's time for Taking Care of Business on Midlands 103. With thanks to the local enterprise offices of Leash, Offaly and Westmeath. Find us on localenterprise.ie and let's talk business.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Taking Care of Business. I'm Ronan Berry, and coming up over the next hour, salaries are set to remain high in 2026, but not necessarily across all roles. In a short while, I'll be speaking with Breda Dooley of Matrix Recruitment about pay trends, skills shortages and what employers and job seekers in the Midlands should expect in the year ahead. Also, when systems reward appearances over outcomes, bad behaviour becomes inevitable. I'll be talking to Michelle O'Keefe, a co-founder of Platform55, about accountability, leadership failure and what businesses can learn from recent healthcare controversies. I'll give you a hint there. There was a story that broke in the UK last week about a GP who kind of came up with a kind of an innovative way of getting time off work to collect their kids on one or two occasions. The sanctions imposed were very, very strong if you look at the context versus other cases over there. So we're going to look at that and look at what accountability, true accountability is in the workplace. Also, you'll hear about a manufacturing programme that is largely based out of the Irish Manufacturing Research Facility in Mullingar. It's been awarded over €5 million in EU funding. What does that mean for manufacturing companies, particularly across the Midlands? What benefits might it bring? What challenges might it bring to people in roles that may be replaced by automation? Or can it actually guarantee that those people will have the long-term skills in order to stay in long-term sustainable employment and keep the Midlands region thriving? Because believe it or not, this region has the highest proportion of manufacturing jobs per capita versus other regions across the country, even up around the Dublin area. So, we've got something good going on here across many, many sectors. But like many places, the Midlands is absolutely dependent on the small firms. And this week, the Small Firms Association has launched its new strategy called Putting the Small Business Owner First. It's the SFA strategy 2026 to 2029. To give you an idea who the SFA is, they represent businesses employing up to 50 people. So again, a lot of you listening, a lot of you have people working in companies across the Midlands. They fall into this category as well. Now, just to put that in context, 98.6% of all enterprise in Ireland have less than 50 people working in them. And that's about 43% of the overall private sector employment, or 860,000 people employed directly. Now let's look at what the Small Firm Association, how they position those small business owners as, not just as a business owner, but as job creators, as community anchors, as invisible investors in our towns and villages. Hence why this strategy is an important one for them. To learn more about the strategy and what the big ask from the SFA will be in the coming years, I'm delighted to be joined by David Broderick. David, good evening and welcome back to Taking Care of Business.
Evening, Ronan. Thanks for having me on.
David, it's quite a comprehensive strategy you've launched. It's broken down into a number of pillars. Unsurprisingly, cost control will come into it, and we'll be talking about things like wages and the auto-enrolment and all extended sick leave entitlements. But also access to credit is a key part. But give us a quick overview of the key parts of your strategy for the years ahead.
Yeah, well, as you pointed out, Ronan, and it's quite topical given some of your later contributors there around wages. This strategy is a blueprint for prosperity for the small business owners. We're looking at how and what we're going to engage with government over the next 3 years. It's split into 6 pillars, which I'm sure we'll get into. But really, the overarching theme of it is when government is going to make a change, whether that be a support or a regulation, we really want them to think about the small business owner. Because if you support the small business owner, they always say that small businesses are the backbone of this economy. But the small business owner is the human with the backbone. And a lot of the feedback from our members, Ronan, is they kind of feel a little bit forgotten about. You've mentioned auto-enrolment, you've mentioned statutory sick days. A lot of our businesses, our members are saying, well, we will do this for our employees. Of course, we will. But what about our, statutory entitlement to a pension? What about our sick days? They say there's no cure for a common cold. They've obviously never tried to run a small business because There's no time for sick days when you're that type of person. So there is the pillars, which I'm sure we'll go through, but I think the key bit and the key shift for this is putting that focus back on the small business owner, who, as you said, is contributing such amount, to the Midlands. They're sponsoring the local Gaelic teams. They're having the vibrancy around the towns and villages. And if they go, the life will go out of this village, of those villages, and we just can't have that happen. So we're calling on government under these 6 pillars to make sure that the accurate supports and the right supports are in there to support the small business owner.
Was there anything in the consultation process that really jumped out at you that maybe you hadn't expected to get fed back to you by the owners of these businesses?
I think even going back to my first point, small business owners are tired. I mean, I was down in Athlone, as you said, as was mentioned in the press release. We had 50 small business owners in the Hudson Bay Hotel who are the shortlisted finalists for the National Small Business Awards. And even though they're there for a masterclass weekend, it was just sitting around listening to them. Although there's a lot of energy and there always is resilience, there is a weariness, Ronan. There is it has been a constant avalanche as I've been on this program before of things over the last couple of years. You take 1st of January, you had an increase in the minimum wage of 65 cents. That's going up to 14 euros 15 cents is the minimum wage now. You have auto enrolment, which will add about between 1.5 and 3% to wage bills. It just seems to be a constant stream. So even the fact that they finally said, and I suppose that they were pushed to, what about us, is not something we've really heard. I think maybe as a country we've taken for granted this backbone of the economy that's been there. And so that was something that really rang true for us. And that's why the core of this business is shifting that focus for government. Before you do anything, can we please look after this vital part of society, both for the towns and villages, but also, Ronan, there's a lot of talk about the FDI industry. I mean, the FDI come for the reasons, but the key reason they come is not just the education skills, it's actually the supply chain that we offer them by the indigenous businesses around the country. I mean, if you take the semiconductor industry, there's 970 small businesses involved in the supply chain of that, and even from Kiernan Steel to her concrete, that sometimes gets overlooked as to the importance of the role that they do play in society. So that's where the reframing and refocus is coming from.
Absolutely, and that 98.6% of all businesses that have less than 50 employees, it just shows the scale and the sheer importance of them. But you represent businesses from across all sectors. Are all sectors kind of feeling the same pains and really concerned about the year ahead, do you think?
No, I wouldn't say it is across sector. I think depending on the stage of the business and the stage of the life cycle that they're in as well. And the other thing is, how did they adapt to COVID? I mean, there's a lot of businesses out there who were forced into adapting, whether that being going digital or whatever it was, in a shift in terms of going online, in terms of how they operate. Some are doing very well. They overnight almost reduced costs and found a different market, found a different avenue. We hear this with the tariffs as well. People go and looking at markets that they mightn't have looked at before. So it isn't across the board. Obviously, the experience economy, your retail, your hospitality is getting the headlines, and they have a nice support coming in now, which the SFA lobbied hard for in terms of the VAT reduction. That'll be coming in on July 1st. I think that was key. A lot of the businesses in our membership that spoke to that said, we're clinging on here until July 1st to kind of get that relief. But the VAT reduction, although we called for it, that only accounts for about 25% of all small businesses. We're kind of looking with this strategy, what about the other 75% as well? And that's why, I suppose, under our cost and competitiveness, when we look at that, we're looking at short, medium and planning for long-term support for small business. But we in the SFA will be lobbying hard for a pure PSI rebate in Budget 27. I can't believe I've said those words on the 13th of January.
Yeah, but that's it. I know myself on this show, we always plan to do a budget special and it creeps up on you just before, you're thinking it's months away and the kites will start flying very, very shortly for that one, believe you me. But you mentioned things like costs, competitiveness and regulation. all things that I know our local Minister for Enterprise, Tourism and Employment, Peter Burke, has spoken at length about on this show, on Midlands Today and across national media, about really working for small businesses. Your strategy document suggests, though, it needs an awful lot more work on these. What areas in particular there are effectively stifling business and business growth?
Exactly. But look, this was a strange strategy to write, because normally you'd be kind of planning for different governments and things. The SFA was very successful at lobbying for specific supports for small business. So we were successful, and we got them in the programme for government. We worked with Minister Burke before the change, and obviously he was the one to maintain his position. So we had good momentum. So we did lobby hard to get a lot of things in there, such as the cost of business advisory forum, for example. I mean, cost is the number one issue for businesses. Minister Burke, then, he put that in the programme for government. In fact, I sit on that forum. So a lot of what this strategy about is ensuring the correct and adequate implementation of a lot of the things that are in the programme for government. So, as I said, cost of business forum, the changes to PRSI and VAT are in the programme for government. We want to make sure that they're successfully implemented and affect real change. The regulation piece is more the medium term, I would say. Less or more proportionate regulation is what we're looking for. And the Minister himself brought in the SME test. Was one of the first things he did back in April 24. In fact, spoke to him about this at our launch in the Hudson Bay. He came down and joined us. And, the SME test that he brought in, I suppose a lot of members don't see the massive benefit that will have, because the SME test is all new regulations or laws that come to Cabinet must pass the SME test. So will this have a disproportionate effect on small business? So, we are heading off some of the more medium term, shall we say, or long term issue. Sometimes a regulation is passed and we don't see the knock on effects until it hits. So there is that short, medium and long term focus on less or more proportionate regulation. But we need to, I suppose, stay involved with the key stakeholders and policymakers to ensure that remains the case.
Yeah, like if you speak to any business that is going on doing public procurement or using e-tenders or tendering for particularly public sector work, what we often see is the rules that apply for large tenders, we kind of tend to try and apply them then to even small value tenders, because it's nearly easier to apply all the rules. So from a small business perspective, if we look at maybe sustainability reporting or even gender pay gap reporting, stuff like that, is that what needs to pass the SME test to ensure that we're not just loading these businesses with more and more paperwork?
Absolutely. If you look at public procurement, for not even public procurement is a particular bugbear of the SFA. Sometimes when these tenders are written, you could say that inadvertently, we hope inadvertently, it does automatically preclude a small business. And what I mean by that is, even if you look at some of these tenders, they might look for an insurance of a value of X million. I mean, no small business is going to have that level of cover on insurance, and therefore they cannot apply to that tender. So we, working directly with the Office of Public Procurement, and in fact, Minister Frank Feehan we're actually looking for our first meeting with him. We hope to have that with him in early February. He looks after public procurement to bring these things. So sometimes they're inadvertent things, Ronan, and they just exclude people immediately. There is some creativity in there. We would like to see, there's over in the UK, there is a certain percentage of tenders that has to go to family businesses. Is it something that we can ask government that a certain percentage of a tender goes to a small business, even if it's part of a bigger organisation that, that the onus would be put on larger organisations to open the door to smaller organisations as part of the tender, as a requirement of the tender.
Absolutely.
So these are all things that we're going to be exploring over the next couple of years.
A lot of listeners are they're feeling the pain there now. I'm sure they've been through that process and they know exactly what it's like. And I would hazard a guess that many of them will see things like access to credit as another absolute bugbear and a nightmare thing. And this is something that you're really, really putting on in your strategy this year, is looking at almost creating a semi-state bank for small business access to finance.
Yeah, well, this came through the process of when we were, workshopping what needs to be in here. And a lot of the people around the table, some were around when the last semi-state bank was around. So the idea and the concept is there. So what's in the strategy is to explore the concept of a semi-state bank. Now, in reality, when you break that down, Ronan, what's missing? Well, actually what's missing is access to certain financial products, depending on the stage of business. So, if since there was a semi-state bank, there has been things like the SBCI, Strategic Banking Corporation of Ireland, and Microfinance Ireland, both doing fantastic work. But by the way they're structured and the funding that certainly SBCI gives, it still needs to go through a bank or a financial institution's regulations. So that can be where things fall down. It's still the risk profile that you would get on a normal pillar bank or alternative lender. So what we need to look at is, well, what's the solution here? We know that the gap, certainly when it comes to finance, and, there's probably two particular areas that we hear a lot in access to finance. And the first, most of the loans that are being looked for now, are such a sign of the times, are simply for working capital. A loan to keep the doors open, to keep operating, because cash flow through a number of different elements has got so much tighter and margins have got smaller. And to get access to a adequate level of debt in working capital just isn't happening at the moment. It's certainly a blockage that we see. And that could be, a company has just started up or, is in that stage. But then you look at the stay-up. So we talk about the startups, which we think we have a good ecosystem. But the stay-up companies, those companies that are, in business, 5-10 years, they have maybe 10, 15, 20, 30 employees. Those are actually looking for medium-term capital. That's the 3 to 7 years. And again, as a product, now they need that to grow. They need that to develop. They need that to invest in machinery. They need that to invest in digital, as is another part of the strategy. This transition to, an era-defining tool that can increase competitiveness called AI. But people aren't ready for that. They need to invest. So they need access to medium-term capital. And again, as a product, we're hearing on the ground from businesses, from Moat, from Athlone, from wherever it is, that they just can't get that access. So is it a semi-state bank that's the solution, or is it looking at products? Is it looking at tweaking what the SBCI does? That's what we're going to set out over these following months and year or two.
Well, clearly, and that's coming from surveying and actually meeting your businesses and representing them in the best way possible. David, we're not going to get through all the pillars this evening, but I think it's such a comprehensive body of work, and going to invite listeners to go to ibec.ie, click on the Small Firms Association, download that report and have a read, because I'm sure a lot of what you've said is really resonating with business owners across the Midlands. David, thank you so much for that. I'll be back to you again, I think, in a couple of weeks' time, and we'll follow up on maybe more of those items too, because there's a lot in it. And well done to you all on a very comprehensive body of work.
Just to say, the SFA i.e. we'll get them there quicker. But Ronan, I really appreciate you having me on, and to any businesses listen, we're there to support you.
Not at all. Thanks a million, David. That's David Broderick there, Director of the Small Firms Association, sfa.ie, and you can find out or get all the details of that report. I say extremely comprehensive. We've touched on basically 2 pillars out of 6 there. We could have done a whole show on it, I think, and it's one I'll definitely double back on again. Time for a quick break. After that, we're going to look at salaries, what to expect for the year ahead. Are they going to stay going up? Are they going to rise? will they bottom out? And is it equal across all sectors, or are there some sectors where it's going to be a bonanza year? Find out in just a couple of moments.
Taking care of business with thanks to the local enterprise offices of Laois, Offaly and Westmeath. Find us on localenterprise.ie and let's talk business.
Still to come on the show this evening, I'll be looking at when systems reward appearances over outcomes, when bad behaviour becomes inevitable. I'll be speaking to Michelle O'Keefe of Platform55 about accountability, leadership failure and what businesses can learn from some recent healthcare stories and controversies. But before that, 2026, we often hear at the start of the year, will it be a year where salaries continue to rise? And kind of across media, there are reports and suggestions that salaries will continue to rise this year as well. So as we head into the year 2026, what should employers and workers really expect? Breda Dooley is Head of Recruitment at Matrix Recruitment. She's based in Athlone, County Westmeath. And Breda joins me now to unpack the key findings from their recent Salary Guide 2026, looking at where pay is rising, where skill shortages are most acute, and what the trends mean for employers and job seekers right across the Midlands. Very good evening, Breda.
Good evening, Ronan. Thank you for having me on your show.
Breda, I suppose, answer the big question. Are salaries rising, and is everybody going to see the benefit?
I suppose the key message from Matrix Recruitment and what we're seeing out there in the market is that the Irish labour market is stabilising. It's not slowing down, but there's definitely a lot more confidence returning after a lot of global uncertainty in 2025. So salaries are broadly kind of remaining steady, but we are seeing some critical skills, particularly in the area of kind of engineering and sustainability. There is a short supply, so there is going to be a rise in that area. Employers are hiring more deliberately. There's a strong focus with employers to look at retention, resilience and future ready skills. So what we're seeing is a market that's stabilising rather than slowing. Employers are confident, but they're a lot more strategic, and so that you'll see a lot more smarter hiring in 2026. But there's a long-term confidence in the Irish labour market.
Some of those acute skills they're almost in an area that is still quite new, particularly even in business terms. So our employers then, they probably don't even have the option of looking across the country or even looking overseas to find that skill set. Are they looking at upskilling their own employees through things like microcreds or other higher level education courses and trying to build the ideal candidate within? Is that becoming the only option, or indeed the most favoured option?
Absolutely, companies are looking at internal mobility. Do we have the staff internally that can take on those extra, that area that maybe we are lacking that skill set, as you say, can we upskill them and train them? So there's a lot of focus on that, and that's particularly in the mid to level kind of leadership area, where, and the digital transformation, where that skill set is required. So companies are looking at internally. But, as I say, in the engineering sustainability, that is where we're seeing the growth. We expect to see maybe a 10% growth in sustainability jobs and the salary rise there, and the same, about 8% in engineering. But again, it's an area that's evolving. There's a lot of, transformation in that area. So it's a skilled, new area, and we are seeing where they will command the higher salary going forward.
You're also seeing, potentially steady growth in manufacturing, quality and lab roles, supply chain, HR, sales and marketing. So again, kind of a positive outcomes from the survey you've done so far.
Absolutely. Definitely the market is stabilising, and there's a lot more investment out there. And companies, we were talking to a lot of companies, even, at the end of Q4. So there's a lot of talk about hiring. It did stall, definitely in 2025, but going into Q4, we saw a lot more activity where companies maybe were looking at short-term hiring, but now they're looking at long-term kind of permanent hires out there. And yes, you are right, like the Quality Lab, that's the hub in the Midlands. There's a lot of kind of pharma, medical device companies that are always looking for people, in the area of quality assurance, validation, and I'm coming back to, I suppose, that there's a skill shortage, like in the mid to senior level area as well. supply chain. There's a significant transformation going on there in that area. So there's again an area where there's, people need to be able to read data, improve the forecasts, and look at kind of optimizing the inventory levels as well. So there's new skills that are required. And I suppose that's what we're saying to people. If they are looking, they have to make sure that they have that skill set that employers are looking for now.
Employers historically, and people sometimes laugh about it now, used to say preferably be proficient in Excel. Is proficiency in AI or a knowledge of AI now a requirement or a nice to have at this stage? Or, as David Broderick kind of said, there maybe are some companies just a little bit afraid of it still and not sure what to do when it comes to artificial intelligence and everything it brings?
I think AI is very much embedded in a lot of business organisations. It's very much part of our day-to-day life. So it is something that we all have to make sure that we're aware of, or we're upskilling ourselves in it. It is going to remove kind of the more routine kind of processes. So you have to have that analytical skill. Again, communication is going to be. We're hearing that a lot from our employers, that they want people that are going to be able to be strong communicators and have that leadership when it comes to implementing these new automated processes or this new AI, that people are going to be able to deliver the message that is good for the company, and people need to be able to adapt to this change. So that's kind of, employers are looking for people that are future proof for the change that is happening.
I said actually on last week's show I spoke to Jack Murray from Media HQ, and actually Jack spoke at length about the use of AI as a productivity tool, but that you still need the human element when it comes particularly to storytelling and business. So it's interesting to hear that the same maybe is a requirement with lots of companies. But looking at your report, I mean, we've put a spotlight there on some sectors, including quality and lab work, but even the area of credit unions, probably not one that people are automatically going to think of, but huge opportunities for growth in that sector, and some quite decent salaries floating about too.
Absolutely. Credit unions, they're modernising. There's a lot more, they are broadening kind of what the service offering. So there's a lot more requirement for governance and compliance and lending skills. This is what credit unions are requiring. They are all kind of amalgamating. So they're becoming a big, I suppose, sector within Ireland as well. So definitely the salaries are particularly in regulation, digital transformation. These are experienced professionals that the larger credit unions are looking for. So there is a bit of competition between, I suppose, the banking sector now and the credit unions out there.
What I do notice is, like, has been again a historical thing, that there was a kind of a Dublin salary range for a lot of roles, and then a Midlands and West range, which is lower. Is that still the case, or the fact if there is a skills shortage and there's demand for those skills in these roles, is the differential actually that much when it comes down to it?
Probably in certain areas, but it is kind of, you are seeing that it is kind of levelling out a little bit. It is kind of coming down towards the Midlands, so the salaries are nearly kind of coming up to the same level as the Dublin, because these specialist skill sets, everybody wants them. So if you want to attract this talent, you have to make sure that you're competitive regardless of your location.
You know, again, because I suppose when the world shifted a little bit with COVID-19 and it opened up that option for people to work from home too, you'd imagine that differential is probably less. It'll be very interesting to see at the end of the year what it actually is and what people are prepared to take. But sounds positive overall. Any key things employers should be looking out for in the year ahead, Breda? Absolutely. Employers, I suppose the one thing that we're hearing all the time is employers... employees want kind of flexibility, so it's not going away. People want that kind of hybrid working, and if you want to attract the talent pool or a larger talent pool, you need to be able to have that flexibility in the workplace. Not every job can do it, but if it is a role that you can offer, please do offer that as well. And also be looking at kind of, employees want to make sure that they're moving into a company that is, I suppose, going to grow, and that they're keeping up with their kind of
their environmental and their ESG, I suppose, and to make sure that it's very much part of their HR strategy, because that's really good branding for a company. If they have a good ESG strategy in place, it will attract talent, because that's what people are looking for, and they're looking to make sure that they can get into a culture and a place that a company that is going to grow and has the same values as for potential new employees.
Absolutely, and it brings in both customers, it brings in employees, it helps you retain and develop the staff you have. So sound advice as always. Breda, thank you so much for that this evening, and I look forward to talking to you again throughout 2026.
Thank you, Ronan.
That's Breda Dooley there, the head of recruitment at Matrix Recruitment. Breda, of course, based in Athlone. So yeah, positive outlook overall there. Do you think your salary will rise this year? I don't mean if it's gone from the minimum wage from $13.50 to $14.15. Do you think across the boards will there be rises? Or are there many sectors that will be saying, let's just hold off for a while, lads, and see how the next 6 months go, particularly if you're in hospitality maybe, or in those sectors most affected by things like the VAT rate and that? Let me know. 083 3010 103 is the text and WhatsApp number. Breda mentioned flexibility and having that as an important part of any role that you're trying to fill. We're going to touch on that topic just after this quick break.
Taking care of business with thanks to the local enterprise offices of Laois, Offaly and Westmeath. Find us on localenterprise.ie and let's talk business.
Before the break, Breda Dooley from Matrix Recruitment mentioned flexibility as being a key component of any job role that you're looking to fill, or even if you're looking at retaining the staff that you have, because as we all know, there's a massive skill shortage and a lack of talent out there to fill all those new roles that Breda has spoken about. But when it comes to flexibility, we do need to define what it is, and there's some stuff we take for granted, other stuff we don't, and sometimes it gets a little bit out of hand. Did you come across a story in the past week of Dr. Helen Eisenhower, a female GP who was suspended for 5 months for adding 2 fake patient appointments to her diary? The reason for doing so she could collect her children. Now, not saying that was the right thing to do, but it was the only thing that she felt she could do at the time in order to collect her children. This is a GP, remember, and think of the hard work and the phenomenal work they do. Well, I came across a post on LinkedIn there just a couple of days ago by Michelle O'Keefe. She's a co-founder of Platform55. They're an Irish company focused on accountability, transparency and better decision making in complex organisations. And actually Michelle's co-founder Tracy Gunn was on with me just over about 2 years ago talking about the need for men to become advocates for parental leave in the workplace. But Michelle dug a little bit deeper and she looked at similar sanctions put on male employees in a very, very similar sector. And lo and behold, what she discovered was they're not exactly equitable, and some actually quite concerning, where male doctors were accused of and found guilty of rape and received a 12-month suspension, and with a tribunal panel deeming it a one-off event. This last year, a transplant surgeon was found guilty of abusing his power through consensual touching during surgery, suspended for 8 months. And Michelle went on to speak about how in Platform 55 every day they hear from women sitting at desks, and some who are literally clutching their bags under the table, trying to find the confidence to say they need to leave to collect their kids, that they need to make excuses, they feel judged, they're feeling guilty and torn between wanting a career and wanting to be there for their children. Very good evening, Michelle. 2026, not a lot has changed then.
No, unfortunately not. And good evening. Great to be on the show, Ronan. Well, we're only a few days in, so I can't say that just yet, but we're certainly, the early signs from gender pay gap as well would indicate that equality is truly on the table as a focus for 2026 for our businesses.
Because I know when I spoke to Tracy nearly 2 years ago, you very much had a female focus. Actually, your website now talks a lot about it's just across the board's accountability and leadership and stuff like that. Is that to say that men are really beginning to be advocates now, or what has changed, I suppose, in your own company journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So we historically would have supported women on their returners journey, which is a crucial point. The average age of having a baby in Ireland is 32. So we're talking about women who are quite experienced in their roles, on leadership progression paths. And I think Breda was speaking to this on just before here on the earlier conversation. We're looking to really progress the talent that we have in our organisations. We were losing a lot of female talent at that key point, and that was the cause of the gender pay gap and the lack of progression at that point. But what happened was we saw a lot of dads becoming quite vocal and parenting out loud and becoming quite vocal about the roles that they play both at home and work. And we would have had maternity returners workshops for women to support them on the return. And 1 month last year, we had more dads on the paternity session than we did have mums. So I think, at mid-management level, the dads are becoming quite vocal about the role they play at home and the time they need from work. Only 1 in 8 men historically would have taken their full leave entitlements, but we're seeing a lot more companies getting quite encouraging of men to take their leave. And we had a couple of male senior leaders, which we've coined the SLDs, the senior leader dads, as opposed to the SLTs. And we've had dads speak on panels about their experience. And we had the CFO from Kerry Group actually speak about, pregnancy loss and where he was when that happened in his family, and how that shows up for him now. And we had a senior leader from Danske talk about him returning to work 2 days after his wife having a baby, and now looking back with guilt on that. And guilt was a word we would associate a lot with women returning from maternity leave, and now we're hearing the dads saying this and becoming quite vocal. So there's certainly from mid to senior level, there's a real strong vibe that people want things to change in organisations, but we still face some dated legacy issues at the SLT level.
That guilt, that kind of what Dr. Eisenhower did, in order to go and collect her children. Is that something that if there was a male in that position, he probably would have proudly announced, I have to go and collect my kids, and just walked out the door? Is it still that very much that female thing? And what can change that?
Yeah, I think what needs to change is how senior leaders and leaders their behaviour internally. I don't know in this scenario, like we saw some of the comparable punishments for male activity in the same industry. So I don't think they would have had the same punishment. And what's really concerning is the tribunal suspended her for 5 months, and they suspended her to, quote, to reflect the gravity of her conduct and to send out a clear signal to Dr. Eisenhower, the profession and the wider public. And for me, that says more about the industry than anything else. So if you have leaders and people at the top of an industry acting in this way and punishing this way, it says a lot more about them than it does about the individual. Like, the behaviour was definitely wrong, but the punishment, when compared to others, really exposes a deep inconsistency. So I think the key thing to note about this, it wasn't about the individual. Like, it wasn't about a bad woman, a bad decision, or a lack of confidence. I think it's about a system that doesn't allow people to say, I need to leave on time, a system that's rewarding presenteeism and that's actually penalising caregiving. When people feel that they have to bend the rules just to meet their basic caregiving responsibilities, that's not an integrity issue, that's a design failure. So what we can do to change that, I think we've really got to focus on, it's not about policies, it's not about changing policies. Like, most companies would have, a basic maternity, paternity, flexibility policy in place. That's not what this is about. It's about, ensuring that our people leaders are equipped to handle those conversations, and that the culture of the organisation allows people to feel that they can ask for what they need, not like within reason. I actually met a girl recently. I was out for lunch, and she's stepping away from a 17-year career because she feels she's not going to get the flexibility to settle her autistic son into primary school. And when we were having the conversation, I was listening to her, and she feels she's not going to get the support. She doesn't even feel comfortable asking for it. And that's going to be an attrition of a senior female leader after 17 years because the culture doesn't even allow for those conversations to happen.
And the question is, if the worst case came and she does leave that role and she goes looking for another one, will she be accepted by another company? Because that's a huge body of experience to have in any industry or sector.
Not only will she be accepted, but, and again, as Breda was saying, there are jobs out there, and people are looking at companies, and they will be, the people looking at, especially at that level, will be asking questions about what's your policy on flexibility, what's your equality, what's your gender pay gap, and what are your ESG initiatives. And she will find a role in a company that is focusing on flexibility, that's focusing on equality. And flexibility doesn't necessarily mean that everyone works from home all day every day. It's about understanding what real life looks like for individuals and how we can support that.
Yeah, once everybody's not being flexible at the same time, sometimes, and nobody's working at all, that can go a bit overboard with some places. But I suppose from your research and the work you're doing, have you identified kind of the typical system failures that are there? Like what is it that's driving those? I know you touch on things like maybe targets, or just that feeling that you need to be seen in work to be appreciated at all, or to be shown that you're doing anything. What are those kind of key things that you notice are cropping up all the time?
Yeah, so I think, obviously the GP with a diary, it's very obvious what happened there. But there are people that are sitting in the office thinking, if I don't get the next train, I'm not going to make the creche. And they're not working, they're not being productive, and it's actually causing a lot of stress. So this idea of presenteeism is a problem. So, in healthcare and in other businesses, we're measuring outputs. We are ignoring the human constraints, and then we kind of act shocked when people game the system. So if there's very fixed targets and flexibility isn't available and empathy depends on the manager, people will tend to hide their reality, try and work around the system and absorb that stress privately. And this disproportionately affects women and carers and parents. And it's not because they're less committed. So, I think we see this a lot all the time. Having policies in place to allow managers to enforce them with some discretion and some flexibility really works. Having senior leaders role modelling what flexibility works like. Well, I worked in media years ago myself, and there was a CEO who used to say, don't put any meetings in my diary before 9:30 because I'm on the school drop off. And that was before, we heard men, really, really parenting out loud. And that provides people with trust and a platform to have those conversations in their offices.
So 2026 should be the year of basically redesigning your system to support good old-fashioned honesty, and if everyone's transparent, it should work better.
Absolutely. I think we need to look at designing workplaces for real lives and not making people bend rules to cope. If they're doing that, the system is broken, and you need to look at your structures. And you will get better results and productivity if you do that. I think in 2026 we need to treat major life events as business critical and not as personal issues. When organisations label things like fertility or family leave as personal issues, they push the risk onto the individual. And these are the moments for businesses to really step up, and they're your biggest retention and progression opportunities, I think. And that's where leadership capability is going to matter most. And then I think as well, in your previous guest, you were talking about upskilling internal talent. I think we need to equip managers to do the hard things well. We did research, and 8 out of 10 people leaders say they're not comfortable having conversations about sensitive topics that impact the family. That could be miscarriage, fertility, menopause. We need to upskill our people. We need to leave. The policies are the policies, but people don't leave because of policies. They leave because of managers. So I think we need to upskill our managers, make sure they can lead with empathy, make sure they can re-onboard someone post-family leave, make sure they can handle conversations with empathy. So they would be the big things I would be focusing on for 2026.
Well, you've absolutely nailed that one down anyway, and I think anyone listening, just write that down, listen back to this tomorrow and take note. You've put it perfectly and brilliantly there. Michelle O'Keefe, thank you so much for that this evening. The business is Platform55. Throw them into Google there, you'll find them. You'll find Michelle and her co-founder Tracy Gunn, very active across LinkedIn as well. Thanks, Michelle, for that this evening. I found that a bit of an eye-opener there too, so definitely something to put on your agenda for 2026. I'll take a quick break after that. Find out about Factory Exchange and why it's been awarded over €5 million in EU funding.
Taking care of business with thanks to the local enterprise offices of Laois, Offaly and Westmeath. Find us on localenterprise.ie and let's talk business.
Irish manufacturing research based in the Science Park in Mullingar leads the Factory Exchange project, which has just been awarded €5.7 million in EU funding for its second phase. Its aim is to work as a one-stop shop for businesses to get to grips with advanced digital technologies, receive expert advice and avail of funding. Karen Yansakova is the Senior Programme Manager at IMR with responsibility for the Factory Exchange programme, and she's been speaking to Will Faulkner on Midlands today, and we'll ask Karen how they address general employee concerns about roles being replaced by AI or other forms of automation.
So we protect because we offer also upskilling and reskilling services. So it's about knowledge sharing. And in our consortium means like partners who are involved in this program. We have now 17 partners, also small local SMEs, which are directly accessible, and they can explain the basics about how AI can support their business in a very positive way. So we are very human-centric. It means we look into the workers and employers, and we offer skilling programs, reskilling programs, where we really support the whole company holistically in getting the knowledge and be ready for scaling the business and understand what's going on.
And if I can pick your brain about the future, what new jobs or roles do you see realistically emerging in the Midlands over, say, the next 5 years?
As said, we see it based on the demand we receive also from the businesses, but also how is it shaped by the European Union and by the national government. It's about really designing the manufacturing, so it's automation of the processes. It's using robots, but it's also just finding some digital solutions, like helping you to understand data, helping you to understand how the workers can have their working environment using machines, but also using just digital solutions in their processes. So this is the future. It's circularity, it's automation, it's digital transformation. So these are the words, fancy words, which are used these days.
And those words, they exactly tie in with what I've been speaking about in the show all evening with David Broderick from the SFA, with Michelle O'Keefe there from Platform55 and Breda Dooley from Matrix Recruitment, upskilling critical skills in areas like digitalisation, automation, sustainability, ESG, those key roles that business are struggling to fill. So whether you're inside a business already and you can look at developing your own skill set, whether you can shift careers or pivot into a new role, there's education platforms out there. There's loads of ways of doing that. Let's say 2026, despite everything that's going on out there, it's looking relatively positive for Midlands businesses. Let's hope it continues. Anyway, time for me to go. Joe's here next with Country Roads. I'll talk to you all next week.